Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is Stephanie Cunningham with Changing the Face of Yoga, and this is episode 101. And I have a really interesting guest who's doing some really different things, I think, with yoga. Her name is Nikki Myers, and Nikki is the founder of the Y12SR program. She has an MBA. She's a certified yoga therapist. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner and a certified health coach. Born from her personal struggle with addiction, Nikki is the founder of Y12SR, the Yoga of 12-Step Recovery. Based on the theme that the issues live in the tissues, Y12SR is a relapse prevention program that weaves the art and science of yoga with the practical tools of 12-step programs. These meetings are now available throughout the world, and the curriculum is rapidly becoming a feature of addiction recovery treatment centers. Nikki's work has been featured in the New York Times, Black Enterprise, the Huffington Post, Origin Magazine, and CBSNews.com. She is honored to be the co-founder of the annual Yoga, Meditation, and Recovery conferences at Esalen Institute and Kripalu Center. Nikki was named as a Yoga Journal Game Changer in 2015 and honored as a recipient of the esteemed NUVO Cultural Visionary Award in 2014. Welcome, Nikki. I think you're going to be talking to us about something that's so important. And I want to ask if you'd like to add anything to that interview or that introduction that I just gave.
I love it. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you for even inviting me into this conversation. So grateful to be here.
Thank you.
Everything that you read there it's interesting, and you do those kinds of things for publications and all that kind of stuff. However, when I'm introducing myself in any setting, and usually, I start this way with any a venue, at every venue that I'm speaking, I don't care where it is. I used to say if I was speaking at Harvard Medical School, I'd introduce myself the same way. And then 2 years ago, I actually spoke at Harvard Medical School. and I really did introduce myself the same way. And what I say is, I'm Nikki, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a codependent. I'm the survivor of both childhood and adult sexual trauma. I'm a love addict. I'm a recovering debtor, spender, and the big word, the big operative word there is that little word, A-N-D, and I am all the things you said in that bio. I'm a yoga therapist. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner. I'm the founder of Y12SR. I am also the mother of 2 living and 1 deceased child. I'm a grandmother. I'm the grandmother of actually 5, and actually now a great grandmother. Right, I have 3 beautiful great grandchildren.
Wow!
So I love saying all that in the same sentence, because what I've discovered, and that's a lot of what Y12SR is really about. What I've discovered is that if I, praise and honor and put on a pedestal one part of myself, and then I diminish and make bad, awful, and wrong another part of myself, then what I do is create a split. There's actually a split, and it's an internal split. And that split is actually the opposite. It's the antithesis of yoga. Yoga means integration. It means union. It means, connection. It means alignment, right? And so big part of the program is really realigning, really bringing back, reintegrating all parts of ourselves, because all these experiences are a part of who I am. And, that said, they're all a part of who I am, and none of them define me. But all of them have both, grace, and I say them all with the same gratitude and grace. I say all those things with the exact same gratitude and grace, because they make possible this work. They make possible this work in the world. And the work is truly reintegrating all parts of ourselves.
Oh, thank you. I think that's very wise, that we accept all of ourselves and integrate it into who we are. And it would be easy not to say the things that are more painful, isn't it?
Right.
So I think you have to make a real effort to do that. And so thank you very much. As you may have picked up from what we've said, Nikki has developed this program called Y12SR. And I want to go through the addiction kind of process, because she's put this together in, she's got one part of this that she's doing and doing very, very well, but it's not the whole part. And so we need to figure out where you fit in. So if someone is addicted and finds that they would like to change that, the first step after this recognition is to go into rehabilitation.
For many, it is, right? Rehab, and, one of my teachers told me the answer to everything is it depends, right? and I love that. I love that for so many reasons. But when there's a good rehab system, right, and not all of them are created equal, so I need to. But when the foundational rehab is good, it gives a big, big, big kickstart, a big jump start to recovery, and sets a firm foundation. So once someone has made a decision that this way of life is problematic, or what is happening is problematic, then rehab could very well be something, a lot of times it depends on money, it depends on resource, it depends on a lot of things. It's not the only way in order to move into a life of recovery, but it can be a very, very good first step, because it gives a firm foundation. There are other ways, though, right? I mean, there are 12-step meetings. There are plenty of people who have gone to 12-step meetings who did not go necessarily through a particular rehab program. So there are other ways, but rehab is for many, and a lot of times, a really, really big kickstart. Okay.
So is it possible that they could come to your Y12SR program as their first step?
If that works, if they're in an investigative process as to whether or not addiction really is causing them a problem in their life. Yeah, that's possible. Let me tell you the populations that we often see at Y12SR, the Yoga 12-Step Recovery. We often see people who have gone through a treatment program. And the original whole idea of Y12SR was to have this community-based place that people might be able to come to after they finish a rehab program, or if they were in the midst of, doing their own recovery through a 12-step program or some other format, right, through a 12-step program. Mm. And but what we've seen over the course of the years, because Y12SR has now been around since it was actually formulated in 2003, but our first real work began in 2004. We've seen something a little different with it. We often see people who, for whatever reason, might have gotten away from the 12-step program and are recognize that there's something absolutely brilliant within the 12 steps themselves. But because of many possibilities, maybe even because, they didn't feel particularly safe, if you will, at an open 12-step meeting, they've gotten away from that, and then addiction starts to ramp up once again in life. So we see a lot of that population. But interestingly, the other population that we see a lot of are people who may have been involved with yoga and in the yoga practice for some period of time. And they begin to recognize that, just as an example, the bottle of wine that they drink every night or whatever it is hampering the spiritual progress, which is their intentional goal, which is where they want to get to. And they can't quit. And so we also see a lot of that population in Y12SR and at the Y12SR meetings.
Okay, great. So you were saying, I was reading and listening to your videos, and you're saying that the Y12SR is an adjunct tool, but that it provides tools to identify signs of a relapse. I thought that was really interesting. What kinds of things do you do to help people kind of become aware that things might be not where they want them to be?
Exactly. One of the big things with Y12SR, once again, is this combination of the cognitive with the somatic. So as the cognitive basis, we use, the steps, and we use all the things from the 12-step program. But of course, from the somatic basis, we're using yoga. And within the work of the yoga practices, and all the yoga practices are integrated. So, we mean by that at a minimum, they include asana, pranayama, and meditation, right? We always tell folks never skip the meditation. So at a minimum, they include, those things. And it's the combination of the cognitive and the somatic that help us begin to bring people back to their body, to listen in at a deep level, to tell them when they're off course, right? We talk about how the body's going to tell you first, that the mind will often rationalize and justify and make excuses, make all kinds of excuses and all of that kind of stuff. But your body's really going to tell you when something's off. And part of it is the recognition that this body wants homeostasis, right? One of the things that we assert in Y12SR is that what sits under any addiction is some unresolved trauma, something in the domain of unresolved trauma. And because of that, and that trauma lives in the body. And so because of that, we're always bringing people back to the body to begin to recognize when they may be a little off course, right? But the body wants homeostasis, but it will tell us when, and I can feel, for example, that one of the examples that I always use use a lot of in the practices is, I know when I'm being dishonest, that dishonesty has a sensate feeling in my body. You may not know, no one else may know, but I know when because it has a certain feeling within this body. right? And so we're guiding people to those sensations in the body that tell them that they're off course, right? They're one way or the other. Maybe it's too much, maybe it's too little, right? Recognizing that what we're all wanting is that homeostasis piece, which is the middle path. It's not hyper or hypo. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Would you say that with addictions, you become less aware of your body, that you're not really paying attention?
Absolutely. I will tell you, and I know from my own personal lived experience with this thing and from working with hundreds and hundreds of people over the course of the years, part of my using, it really anything is to get as far away from my body as I can get. It's a place that I was looking to avoid or to run from for a long, long time. Right. So part of this is coming back home and feeling once again a sense of safety within my body.
Okay. All right. So that makes a lot of sense to add the body in because it's manifesting some of the problems.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So what would a Y12SR meeting, class, what do you call it? Look like?
Yeah. We often call them meetings.
Okay.
And a lot of that are meetings and practices. And a lot of that is because that's the language that comes from the 12-step programs. Okay. And what we, again, part of this answer is it depends. It can go either way. Usually there's a discussion group, a meeting, and then a yoga practice. So in the meeting itself, we'll start the meeting out by reading a format, and it has many things in it. It talks about the purpose of Y12SR. We read the 12 steps. And we read what we call ground rules, right? And those are some things that we set up to keep the safe space, if you will, even recognizing that safety is relative. But our goal is to create this space of safety such that in the course of these conversations and our practice, energy can move. Right? We want the sense that things are moving, that energy is moving, that energy is flowing. Because we've found, and yoga philosophy teaches us, that it's oftentimes when things get stuck, right? That the things start to get out of whack, right? When things get stuck or there's this sense of grasping or holding on to, or there's this sense of where a place where energy can't move. That is what oftentimes complicates. Things are just stuck, and we always joke and say the energy will get bigger. It's like it does its push-ups and eats its spinach like Popeye, and and it just gets a little bigger. And in that case, it's like anger will turn into rage, right? Or fear will turn into paranoia, right? Because it's just getting bigger because it's stuck. So we want to create a container, if you will, where energy can move. And it is, the way that it's set up is much like a 12-step meeting, is much like it is in a 12-step meeting. So we'll have a topic, and and then there's sharing from others in the group or from whoever's in the group on that specific topic. And then when we finish with that piece, we do what we call a trauma-informed themed yoga practice that's based in whatever the principle is that's sitting underneath the topic, right? Or the principle of the topic. And it's funny because the principles that sit under the 12 steps happen to look a whole lot like the yamas and niyamas as we learned them from yoga. So many times the yoga practices are because the idea of that is those are the qualities that we want to begin to cultivate so that, as my teacher always says, we can make our intentions stronger than our dysfunctional patterns, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to make, the qualities, like the ones that are the yamas and niyamas, we want to make them, we want to embody them in a way and cultivate them in a way that they become stronger and to help that support traveling down a new pathway, a new road that I want to travel that really aligns with what I say are my intentions versus the old pathway, which no longer aligns with what I say are my intentions. So we have this meeting, this discussion, and then this trauma-informed themed yoga practice directly after that discussion. And I say it depends because it could go the other way around. It really doesn't matter whether you have the meeting first in the practice or the practice first in the meeting. It just matters that the two are combined, right? That we're doing this within the same session. And, part of the idea of the practice is we support this space where some of the issues that really are held in our tissues can be released.
Okay. And you say that you also open these meetings to people whose lives are being affected by someone else's addiction.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
It is. So it's equally good for them, even though they're not experiencing addiction secondhand, shall we say.
Yeah.
But so the what you put together is also helpful for them.
Right. It's a universal thing, right? It's a universal program. The phrase we use is something like anyone affected by their own addiction or affected by the addictive behavior of others. And I always love that statement because who's not, right? I mean, when you think about it, really, there's no one who's not affected by the addiction behavior of others. Where I am, right, in the U.S., this is a pandemic problem of huge economic proportion, right? I mean, so it affects us all. From that perspective, everyone's welcome in the rooms of Y12SR to get insights on this problem that does affect us all. But it's open to what, we generally, since it is 12-step based, it's open to, how we usually say it is all A's are welcome, which means, it doesn't matter if it's AA or Alcoholics Anonymous, NA is Narcotics Anonymous, OA is Overeaters Anonymous. There's actually a Hoarders Anonymous and a Clutters Anonymous. There's actually a Racist Anonymous, right?
Really?
There really is, right? There are more than 200 different kinds of 12-step programs. And part of the beautiful thing in the circle, because our meetings are in a circle, what you get to see, because you got all addictions in the room, everything's in the room at the same time. You get to see that no matter what the manifestation of the addiction, whether it's a substance or a behavior, right? Because there's Gamblers Anonymous, there's Sex, Love Anonymous. I mean, it could go on and on and on. But you get to see that there's something underneath, right? That there's a manifestation and that there's something else underneath that manifestation, no matter what the manifestation is. So there's really a lot that you're able to see at a very deep level that's beyond the substance or the behavior.
Okay. So would people be who are being affected by others' addictive behavior?
Right.
Are they going to? Are the other people in the meeting who are affected directly by this addictive behavior, are they going to feel comfortable with these kind of people who really are talking, or is the person that's being affected by others really exploring how that affects them?
Yeah, it really is. In a way, it's all of the above. Let me give you.
I know it was a bad question. Sorry.
Yeah, but let me give you a little example, just of like some of the things over the course of the years. Not just really a lot of times, you might see a particular scenario like this. So there is, of course, a program for those whose loved ones or family members or whatever are directly affected by a substance or a process addiction. Those are programs like Al-Anon, right? Or Nar-Anon, right? So they're programs that the 12-step programs that are directly for those populations of folks. But what you'll see in Y12SR, because we very often see people from Al-Anon and from Nar-Anon and from programs like that in the Y12SR spaces. And what you might happen to see is something like this. The person who is from one of those programs, Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, might speak and, talk about their experience within this whole thing. And then later on, a person who is one who is dealing with their own substance or behavioral addiction might say something in the group like, you know what? Now I understand how my mother feels. Listening to that person that just spoke, I understand how my wife feels. And, and I'm just using those for example. It's because the deal is you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. You can't, right? So in an environment like this, people get to hear and understand and really get a perspective that otherwise would be impossible. So they can get to more of a sense of empathy and compassion for what their family members or others close to them might be experiencing in the course of their addictive behavior.
Okay, so it could be very positive for both sides. Really,
it's I've not ever seen it not be.
Great. Okay, good. All right. Well, we've been talking about the Y12SR ongoing weekly meetings, but you also have some other programs, and one is the Y12SR 12-step study intensive. What's that about?
Right. So it fits all under the domain of our Y12SR education and training kind of umbrella, if you will. And there are two pieces to our ultimate training to actually support yoga teachers and others, addiction recovery professionals, to go back into their home communities and bring Y12SR back into their home communities. And part of that is the Y12SR intensive. And it's not just for that. The Y12SR intensive really is for anyone who wants to be in this inquiry about yoga in combination with the 12-step program. So it looks at, we call this a program for application and understanding, which is terminology that's often used in 12-step programs. And it's just to begin to look at how these two things, we talk about part of this as connecting dots. And the dots we connect in the intensive and in the leadership training are, neuroscience, right? And all the things we know with all the discoveries of neuroscience about how addiction affects the brain. And we connect the dot of yoga philosophy and practices and the cognitive tools of the 12-step program and trauma healing. So in this thing, we just begin the process of connecting those dots together, with ultimately a goal of, just beginning to understand how the tools of yoga can support sustainable addiction recovery.
Okay. All right. And then the next one, which I assume kind of might go together with the second one, is the leadership training program.
Right. That's right. You can do the intensive by itself, right? And just be in this little examination of those things. And all of that, the intensive is offered online, right? It's offered online. Yeah. And then if you want to, as a yoga teacher or an addiction recovery professional or any of that, begin to bring these meetings into your own home communities. There's the second part, right? It takes both parts to be what we call a Y12SR space holder. And so, and the second part is the leadership training. And the goal of the leadership training is to equip and prepare those who want to go back into their own home communities and deliver this, to give them all the tools, everything that they need necessary to support them in going back into their communities and offering Y12SR in their individual communities. Okay.
So is that one in face-to-face or online?
Yeah, that one's face-to-face, right? Okay. It involves a lot of practices. It's where we introduce a whole lot of things where, we want people to have the real face-to-face kind of experience that it takes, the live experience that it takes for that.
Okay. So if someone was interested in this, they could go to your website, and I notice you have lots of events. There's one in the Bahamas I'm thinking about.
That was coming up, and I can't wait.
I know. It sounds wonderful. So they could go to your website and find out about these and perhaps get some more information. Would that be a good way to go? Okay.
That's the best way to go.
Okay. And that would be, and I will give all these contact details at the end, but just for information, it would be www.y12sr.com. Is it .com?
Right. That's right.
Yes, I have .com. Okay. Now, Nikki, it's been a fascinating podcast, but we're getting close to the end. But I want to give you the opportunity to either to tell the listeners about something in more depth that we didn't cover well enough, or something that we haven't covered at all.
Well, your questions have been absolutely wonderful. And, I appreciate the depth that we were able or have been able to get into, already with this thing. I do also would love to tell everyone about one other piece of our underneath our education and training platform. And it's called Breaking Barriers, Transforming the Samskara of Co-dependency, right? And for me, this is a level of depth that I often assert that sooner or later, anyone who's dealing with addiction in any form, right? And one of the ways that we definitely bring in, like the teachings of the Yoga Sutras and the teachings of the Upanishads and the teachings of the sacred texts of yoga in, is, we assert that one of the things that Patanjali himself we're saying in the model introduced in the Yoga Sutras called the kleshas, that ultimately, if you really look at it, in a way, we're all addicted to the way we process our reality, right? We all are. We can all be addicted to our attachments, to our defenses, to particular ways of thinking, all of those kinds of things. And one of the things that yoga, yoga will talk about this is the conditioned mind. And one of the things that the ancients have always asserted is that it's essential to be in this inquiry and examination of the conditioned mind in order to get to the path of moksha or kaivalya or freedom, right? That it takes the examination of the conditioned mind. And ultimately in this process of addiction, that's what we're doing. And this process of healing from addiction, this is what we're doing. And this particular offering, transforming the samskaras of codependency, I think it begins to get at a deep look at those things, that conditioned mind. We use the word codependency. It's been around for a long time. And for lack of a better word, it's been pretty bastardized. Things get dumped into the basket, so nobody knows what it is. It gets kind of diluted. We define it as the disease of the lost self, right? And the idea that is anytime I look outside of myself for something that can only come from the inside, then I'm in a codependent relationship with whatever that is, right? Right? I've often said I've been in a codependent relationship. I don't know if you have these department stores where you are, but we have Nordstrom's over here, right? It's a big department store, and I can be in a codependent relationship with a big department store, right? I'll go in there and get those shoes, and I think those shoes are going to make me into this other person. That it's going to come from something outside of myself, right? Rather than what's inside. And I love this piece because it begins to examine the conditioned mind in that way.
Okay. That sounds fascinating. Yeah. That really does.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you guys would like to talk to or see what Nikki's offering, which sounds really fascinating, you can email her at info@y12sr.com. The website is www.y12sr.com. Facebook is Nikki Myers Yoga, and Instagram is Nikki Sue Myers. So I want to thank you, Nikki. It's really been interesting. I'm really interested in your codependency. I think program. I think that's the way you've described it is very different from my image of what it was when I read it the first time. So I'm glad you did discuss that. And you're just doing a marvelous work. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. My delight.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.